Hey guys, Kelade here. So the Mythic raid has been out for almost a week, and we're seeing some of the top guilds get to Sylvana, some of them even getting to the last phase of the fight. I think for this would be a good time for me to kind of talk about some of the Arms of Fury stuff, some of the Venthyr versus Night Fae stuff, and kind of generally how the raid feels, the patch feels, the chores, and all the like, right? So in the background here, there's the heroic Sylvanas. I am playing as Fury Warrior in this one, but as of last night, I did actually change my covenant from Venthyr to Night Fae. So let's kind of chat about that, right? Because I think that's something that a lot of people want to know about. Should they be making this switch? There's always the caveat. You know, if you're not doing like the bleeding edge content, it literally doesn't matter. So if you really enjoy one playstyle versus the other, whether it's Venthyr or Night Fae as Fury or as Arms, you can definitely still stick to it. This is just for us to kind of edge out just a few, 10, 20, 100 DPS that we can get at wherever we can get, right? So one of the things is, should you be playing Night Fae versus Venthyr? The biggest thing is that the Night Fae, I think, is more consistent. It's going to provide just more overall damage wherever you need, especially if you're playing as Arms. A lot of the fights do have pretty good 2 to 3 target cleave, and even when there is AoE burst, you can always plan your cooldowns around those, right? They're relatively set in when ad timings are spawning. So that's where Arms really comes out. And in fights where either you lust in the beginning or you lust at the end, where your condemn phase initially or your execute phase at the end is shortened, it doesn't hurt Arms as much as it does hurt Fury. And that's where the Fury Venthyr legendary comes in, is the Sinful Surge legendary, right? The hope was that it can do close to what it does in Sims. So right now, I think for people, it kind of depends on how your gear is simming. Like my Fury as Venthyr sims about 1,000 DPS more than my Night Fae as Arms. That's a huge gap in DPS, right? It's like 8.2k as Fury and 7.2k as Arms. But when you actually take into a real fight, it's very hard, one, to make the Fury thing happen, because you need really good condemn and execute phases, right? When you're simming, the way that Sims looks at percentages is not a real representation of the actual fight. So for example, if you do a fight that is 5-minute sims, it'll take the first 20% of the fight, which is the first 1 minute, and it'll be able to condemn the entire minute, which doesn't really happen on the fight, right? If you lust with all the other cooldowns in a raid, right? If you have boomies in your raid that just absolutely blast the boss in the beginning, your condemn phase is not going to be as long. And then on top of that, similar thing with your execute, right? There's all these other execute classes in the game that can all execute too. So your last execute, the 35% of the fight, doesn't necessarily mean that it lasts 35% of the fight duration. That's the other thing, that like, just understanding how that works in Sims and how it affects in real play. Now, of course, if raiders die and you're sitting there executing the boss for a longer percentage of time than that, then the legendary can really pop off. But it's kind of a hard thing to bet on. The other thing with the legendary is that it forces you to be on the target 100% of the time. You cannot have any downtime. You need to be using your condemn as much as humanly possible, right? Because you need to be extending your recklessness, ideally, to, I think right now when you sim it, it's like 52% is how much it maintains it. But ideally in execute phase, you actually need your recklessness to last the entirety of execute. It needs to be up 100% for you to get value. So what that means is that if you get picked for any mechanics where you cannot hit the boss, you're completely screwed that run, right? Or that pull. If you have to do anything where you have to hold DPS, once again, you're screwed, because you literally can't DPS, and not DPS for a short period of time hurts you in later parts of the fight too. So that, in my opinion, is why right now in the raid it doesn't fit, mainly because of the mechanics in the raid. And we can kind of talk about the mechanics in the raid too. Like technically, I actually like some of the stuff that they've done in the raid, and this is something that I said on stream. Like when I look at some other MMOs, even some stuff like Lost Ark, where when they have mechanics, the mechanics can actually come out outside of just what's happening to the fight, right? So like the fight happens, when you do mechanics, you don't have to actually keep DPSing. I think interdispersed in a raid, fights like that actually helps, because it gives people kind of a reason to want to do the mechanics, right? Because you're not like, oh, I need to stay on the boss or else I'm gonna lose DPS. Whereas if you can only do mechanics, well, that's all there is, right? And you don't feel as bad with having to do those. So I actually like those things, like Painsmith. I know it is a very difficult boss. Maybe the ball shouldn't like one-shot you and such, but I do like the way that that's laid out, where when you're doing mechanics, you can kind of focus on it and you don't have to feel shitty for getting out the boss. But of course, mechanics like that really hurt stuff like Fury Warriors, where you basically need 100% uptime playing this spec. So one of the other reasons why you might not want to do that. So my plan also, especially with Night Fae, is that it's good because when you're farming Mythic Plus, Night Fae actually is the best Covenant. So there's a +1 there. The other thing is on fights that are more AoE heavy, like Kel'Thuzad or Soul Render, I would probably still play Fury because this Fury still does well. And then as long as you have the gear to be able to play both specs, you totally still can, right? That's just having the legendaries. That's having, for arms, something that's more crit and haste heavy. Or Fury is something more like haste and mastery heavy. Those are kind of the things that you can do. And then the other thing is I want to talk about trinkets, because I know right now if you look on Blood Mallet, my tip for using Blood Mallet is that it's a good resource for you to have an idea of what you want and what you want to go after, but you should always be simming your own character first, right? And one of the things that is not highlighted on there as much is the Tazavesh trinket, the Tickling Sack of Terror or Horror, whatever it is very strong, especially if you're playing Fury. It's very, very strong. Similarly, the Guardian trinket, Guardian of the first ones, the trinket that boss dropped, also is very strong for Fury. So definitely look into those. And of course, you still have to farm your Overwhelming Power Crystal if you're going to be playing arms. So those are kind of some trinket tips. And then there's also, of course, the Old Warrior Soul from Sylvanas. It's still a very strong trinket, I think, for most melees across the board. The only problem with that trinket is that currently in Mythic Plus, that trinket seems to keep you in combat when you use Invis Pots. So just be careful of that. I think every single time I use an Invis Pot this week, the trinket has broken me out of it, and it's caused some death and potential deplete. So if your group is going to be using Invis Pots, I don't know if clicking the buff off works. I haven't tried that part yet, but you could just not use a trinket, I guess, just to be safe. So just a bit of warning about that trinket. Maybe Blizzard will fix it. I mean, that's clearly a bug, so hopefully they do something about that. Next, I want to really quickly chat about the chores that are in the raid. The chores are actually getting a bit ridiculous. I think the Corythia dailies, just having to do all the dailies, farm all the rares as much as you can. It takes too long, and I think this is always the case that Blizzard has, is that there is generally always going to be some type of reputation farm that's involved, and then there's always some relatively good gear that comes from the reputation farm. But the problem with the time that it takes, by the time you can get the rep to actually buy the gear, you're way beyond the power of what's required, or what the reward is, right? So I feel like for some of that, they should probably scale back the timeline a little bit, just so it's kind of worth it to get that. But there is definitely a glove that you should be getting from the daily section, and it gives you a Domination Socket. So if you guys are missing a glove piece that doesn't have Domination, you should definitely pick up the 220 gloves that are there. That one is very easy to get. Speaking of Domination Sockets, just in case people are curious, the Unholy set is the strongest. And then, right, it's like the Blood and the Frost. But of course, it's still the best for you to complete a set and then to not. So just for those that are unfamiliar with Domination Sockets, right? Domination Sockets appear on 5 pieces of gear on your character, right? For plate, it's going to be helmet, shoulders, chest, gloves, and bracers, right? Now, your gloves and bracers, they're just a socket. There's not bonus. But your helmet, your chest, and your shoulders all have a bonus on them. And you get the bonus if you have all 3 Unholy, all 3 Frost, and all 3 Blood within any of the sockets, and you have that piece equipped, right? So the Unholy set is on the helmet. So if you want that set, you first need to actually have the helmet equipped, because that's the set bonus. And then within any of those 5 pieces, you need the 3 Unholy gems in there. And just to be clear, of all the gems, there are a total of 9 gems. 3 Unholy, 3 Frost, and 3 Blood. So what does that mean? That means if you want the Unholy set, you're going to have to use all 3 of the gems, right? And within each of the 3 different like colors or types, there's only one that actually like does DPS, and the 2 other ones are more like healing and shielding effective. But it's not a big deal, but just understand that that's how it works, right? You want one set to take 3 of your domination slots, and then you take the 2 DPS from either the other 2, and then you put those on too. So for example, if you have all of the gear, what it's going to look like is you want to put on all 3 Unholy gems into your Domination Sockets, and then you put in the Frost one to the ZPS, and then you put in the Blood one to the ZPS. And that's really it. Also, when you upgrade your actual shards, when you upgrade all 3 to the same like next level, it increases the set bonus that you get. So let's say you go with the 3 unholy gems and you upgrade them all to level 1, the set bonus from your helmet gets stronger. Now, I think you can actually only upgrade like all 3 at a set at the same time. Like, I don't think you can actually just boost the DPS version all the way to the top. I don't think the vendor actually lets you. So that's kind of how that works, and you want to be upgrading them all at the same time. And right now, you might not have all of them, and that's the other thing. The acquisition of shards and the domination pieces, been unfortunate. I think the pieces are okay, right? Because it's just gear, right? If you don't get the gear with the acquisition, it's fine. But I think having the added RNG of actually getting the shards on top of it really hurts, especially with how strong it is. I do equate this very, very similarly to like BFA legendaries, in that there are people out there that have all of their 9 shards already, and there are also people out there that only have 1 or 2 shards. The DPS difference that you're going to get from having a set of any of the 3 essentially with somebody that doesn't is huge. And I think it can make a huge difference in even the world first race, or even just anybody DPSing in general. Like, if you walk in the raid and you have the 3 unholy set and you're competing against somebody that doesn't, you're going to be doing significantly more DPS than them. But eventually you will be able to catch up, because there is only 9 gems, so you only have to get 9 of them. And once you get them, that same gem is used to be upgraded over and over. Now, the other thing to note is when you're taking gems out, there is an item that you get from a vendor where you spend a 2,000 stygia to buy, or 2,000 to 2,500 stygia, whichever one it is. But once you buy it, that item is reusable. So you should just buy that ASAP. And then every time you want to take a gem out, you have to use the item to take it out. Don't ever replace the gem with another gem, because currently if you do that, it'll actually delete the other gem, and you're going to have to get it back from the raid again. So don't want to do that. And then as far as for the gem, it's right now, I think it's just once per boss, regardless of difficulty. So every week you want to be killing all 10 bosses. Doesn't matter what difficulty it's on. And that way you can actually make sure you're trying to get as many shards as you can, because that's actually very important too. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on the race so far. Hopefully it's helped you guys. As always, thanks for checking out the video, guys. Feel free to subscribe to see more. See ya.